ABC General Hospital spoilers reveal that rumors swirling around General Hospital have taken a darker, heavier turn, creating the sense that the show is standing at the edge of one of its most dramatic off-screen upheavals in years. What began as a simple confirmation that Steve Burton would be taking a temporary break has now expanded into something far more destabilizing. Whispered speculation has grown louder, pointing to the possibility that both Josh Swickard and Eden McCoy may also be preparing for exits of their own. With each new rumor, the idea that GH is facing a major casting recalibration becomes increasingly difficult to dismiss, and the emotional undercurrent running through the fandom grows more intense. It is no longer simply about three actors taking time away from the canvas. It is about how these shifts imply that Port Charles itself may be entering a new era, one that requires profound narrative restructuring. Steve Burton stepping away is already a seismic adjustment. His presence, regardless of storyline, what has long functioned as a stabilizing force, a narrative anchor whose return or absence always reshapes the pace and temperature of GH. But this time, his temporary departure does not feel isolated. Instead, it feels like the first domino in a chain reaction, the beginning of a broader internal shift. The possibility that Josh Swickard may be next only heightens that feeling. Chase is a character who has grown from a quiet, supporting presence into a deeply rooted emotional component of the Now show, especially through his storyline with Brooklyn. And yet his current arc has been intentionally destabilized: demotion, marital strain, moral frustration, and a lingering sense that his life in Port Charles is no longer aligned with the man he once was. When fiction begins to mirror the tone of backstage rumors, viewers naturally wonder whether the storyline is being shaped to prepare for a departure rather than resolve into a triumphant return. The situation becomes even more complicated with the whispers surrounding Eden McCoy. Jocelyn is not just another character, she is one of GH's core next-generation figures. Someone the show has subtly positioned as a bridge between longtime legacies and a modernized future. Yet her recent storylines have felt strangely unbalanced, vacillating between high-stakes absurdity and scattered emotional grounding. For some fans, that tonal inconsistency has been the first sign that something larger may be in motion behind the scenes. If the rumors prove true, even if only temporarily, the loss of Jocelyn would create a deep vacuum in the younger cast, forcing GH to rebuild a key pillar of its generational structure. Together, these three potential absences create an atmosphere unlike anything GH has faced in years. Each actor represents a different anchor for the show: legacy, energy, emotional stability, and generational continuity. Losing all three at once, even temporarily, would require a complete narrative recalibration. Suddenly, the show's long-running arcs, family conflicts, romantic entanglements, moral dilemmas, and the political battles rising within Port Charles would need to be rewritten from the ground up. A shift this large is not something the writers can mask with quick fixes or sudden redirects. It demands a structural overhaul, the kind of adjustment that only happens when a show is preparing for a brand new chapter. And perhaps that is exactly what is happening. Perhaps GH is entering a moment when the canvas must be cleared just enough to create room for reinvention. The departure of familiar faces, even if temporary, forces characters around them into emotional freefall, breaking old patterns and creating space for new dynamics, darker stakes, and more dangerous story progression. Without Chase, the police department arc loses its moral center. Without Jocelyn, the Corinthos-adjacent youth storyline collapses into uncertainty. Without Burton's character, the criminal underworld and emotional foundations of several families become unstable. These gaps cannot remain empty. They are pressure points that naturally give rise to new adversaries, new alliances, and new internal conflicts. The rumors then do not simply foreshadow exits. They signal a turning point. A moment when GH may be crafting one of its biggest narrative resets in recent years, choosing to rebuild rather than recycle. It is that possibility, the idea that the show is preparing to shock the audience with a story ambitious enough to justify such casting turbulence that electrifies fans even as it unsettles them. Because if these actors do step away even briefly, GH will be forced to respond with something bold, something disruptive, something worthy of the narrative vacuum left behind. In a strange way, the anxiety surrounding these rumors has rejuvenated the fandom. Viewers are no longer simply watching, they are anticipating. They are reading subtext into scenes, scrutinizing character choices, and sensing that the writers are planting seeds for a storyline both sweeping and volatile. Every moment on screen feels suddenly charged with meaning, every argument, every moral compromise, every emotional shift carrying the weight of what might be coming. Whether these departures actually happen remains to be seen. But one thing is already clear: the conversation around GH has changed. The show is once again unpredictable, once again daring, once again capable of shocking even its most seasoned audience. And if this truly is the beginning of a larger adjustment, then Port Charles is standing on the brink of a storyline that could redefine its future. A storyline born not only from narrative necessity but from the creative pressure that comes when too many pillars are removed at once. What collapses must be rebuilt, and what is rebuilt often becomes stronger, bolder, and far more dangerous than before. The rumors surrounding Finola Hughes have intensified the sense that General Hospital is entering one of the most volatile transitional periods in its modern history. If Steve Burton stepping away was the first tremor, and the speculation around Josh Swickard and Eden McCoy signaled a widening fault line, then the whispers that Finola Hughes may also be preparing to leave the canvas feel like the moment the ground truly fanned. Shifts beneath Port Charles. Anna Devane is not just another character who can quietly fade from the frame. She is an institution within the show, a moral axis, a narrative anchor, and one of the last living connections to decades of history that shaped GH into what it is today. The idea of losing her even temporarily introduces a level of uncertainty that magnifies every other rumor into something more urgent, more dangerous, and far more consequential. Anna's presence has always been a stabilizing counterforce to chaos. Whether confronting criminal empires, navigating political warfare, or untangling the emotional webs that bind Port Charles together, she has served as both a compass and a catalyst. Without her, the equilibrium of GH shifts dramatically. The entire structure of the WSB arc, the moral framework surrounding Sunny's world, the emotional continuity linking generations of characters, all of it becomes suddenly exposed, vulnerable, and in need of redefinition. This is why the rumor of Finola Hughes stepping away does not simply add to the existing worry. It reshapes the entire conversation. If Anna's leaving even for a short time, then GH is not dealing with isolated departures. It is confronting a comprehensive narrative reconfiguration. Her potential exit deepens the sense that GH is undergoing a sweeping internal adjustment, one that may not be optional but necessary. When too many foundational characters shift at the same time, the writers are forced to rethink not just storylines but the identity of the show itself. Anna's absence would leave a void that cannot be filled by a single replacement character or a temporary plot device. It would ripple outward, forcing changes in entire story branches, the WSB corruption arc, the evolving alliances in the criminal underworld, the emotional evolution of Valentin Dante's moral journey, and even the political forces rising through Port Charles. Every thread tied to Anna becomes unstable, and every arc connected to her must grow, collapse, or transform. And this is where the true shock begins. Because with Steve Burton on break, with Josh Swickard and Eden McCoy caught in the gravitational pull of exit rumors, and now with Finola Hughes possibly stepping away, GH is not just trimming around the edges, it is facing a metamorphosis. The canvas is thinning at all the wrong, or perhaps all the right places, creating narrative pressure that demands reinvention. Long-running arcs that once seemed anchored suddenly appear temporary. Emotional beats that felt like stepping stones now read like farewells. The show is being pushed into a creative corner, but that corner might be the birthplace of its next major era. Anna's potential departure more than any other symbolizes this transition. She has always been one of GH's most dependable forces, a character whose strength, intelligence, and layered history gave the show its dramatic backbone. When a figure like that disappears, even if only temporarily, the vacuum left behind forces every surviving storyline to rise to meet the weight. For the writers, this is both a crisis and an opportunity. A crisis because Anna's removal fractures existing momentum. An opportunity because her absence creates narrative darkness, and darkness breeds reinvention. This is why the rumor strikes such a deep chord with fans. It suggests that GH is not merely adjusting its cast. It is being rewritten in real time, shaped by pressures both on and off screen. With each actor whose future becomes uncertain, the show loses a piece of its current identity, pushing it closer to a point where reinvention becomes inevitable. And perhaps that is the very shock the series is quietly preparing for, a storyline so transformative that it requires clearing space, reshaping power dynamics, and breaking long-standing emotional structures. If Finola Hughes truly exits, GH will need to confront the aftermath in ways that ripple across every family, every institution, and every alliance within the show. And for the audience, that means turbulence, the kind that brings danger, chaos, and the promise that nothing in Port Charles will ever be the same again. Amid the rising uncertainty surrounding Steve Burton, the murmurs about Josh Swickard and Eden McCoy possibly stepping away, and the stunning whispers that Finola Hughes may also be exiting, a new shockwave has begun to spread, one that carries not fear but anticipation. Because just as Port Charles seems to be losing key pillars, another set of doors appears to be opening, revealing the possibility of long-awaited returns that could electrify the canvas in ways GH hasn't seen in years. And at the center of those whispers are two names that instantly ignite nostalgia, loyalty, and emotional depth: Kimberly McCullough and Kelly Monaco. Robin Scorpio has always been more than a character. She is history, legacy, resilience, and heart. Every return she has ever made has carried emotional weight, grounding the show in the past while pushing it into the future. In moments when GH feels unstable or in transition, Robin becomes a symbol of continuity, of the world of Port Charles stretching backward and forward at the same time. the rumor that she may step back into the narrative now. At a moment when Anna's possible departure threatens to rip open an emotional void, feels almost poetic. Robin's presence would not simply be fan service, it would be a recalibration of energy. A stabilizing emotional force arriving just as the canvas threatens to collapse under the weight of so many departures. Her return, even temporarily, could create a bridge between old wounds and new storylines. Between the fractured pieces of the WSB arc and the moral reshuffling happening in Port Charles. And in the absence of Anna, Robin becomes more than a daughter, she becomes a legacy torchbearer. Stepping into the light at the exact moment the shadows begin to deepen. If the writers truly are preparing for a dramatic reset, Robin's reappearance may be the emotional centerpiece that anchors the transformation. But Robin is not the only name stirring excitement. The whispers around Sam McCall are equally charged, carrying an entirely different kind of narrative heat. Sam's energy has always been rooted in danger, mystery, emotional complexity, and the constantly shifting alliances of Port Charles. Her presence changes the temperature of every storyline she enters. She destabilizes, ignites, accelerates, and if she returns now in the midst of Burton's temporary exit and the crumbling of several character arcs around him, Sam instantly becomes a narrative weapon. Not a replacement, not a filler, a catalyst. Sam returning during a transition this volatile would infuse GH with exactly what it needs: unpredictability. She could slide into almost any storyline: the WSB chaos, the Corinthos power shifts, the moral failures rippling from Chase's downward spiral, or even the emotional fractures created by Joss's uncertain future. Her adaptability is her power. There is no version of Port Charles where Sam returns quietly. She detonates storylines simply by standing in the room. Together, these possible returns form a powerful counterbalance to the looming exits. The tension of loss is suddenly matched by the thrill of renewal. GH may indeed be shedding characters, but the show also seems to be preparing for a new kind of storytelling, one that blends nostalgia with reinvention, honoring the old guard while pushing forward into uncharted territory. The exits create space. The returns give that space direction. And perhaps that is what makes this moment so unusual, so electrifying for fans. GH isn't simply collapsing or rebuilding, it's doing both at once. The departure of icons like Anna, the uncertain future of Chase and Joss, and the temporary loss of Jason create a landscape full of cracks. But the potential return of Robin and Sam suggests those cracks are not signs of destruction. They are the openings through which a new era can take shape. If these rumors prove true, GH is not just adjusting to cast changes, it is rewiring its emotional and narrative DNA. The shadows grow longer with every exit, but the spark of returning legends lights the path forward. And in that mix of loss and renewal, Port Charles stands on the edge of one of its most compelling transformations yet, where every shock paves the way for another, and every door that closes seems to push another one violently open.